Hey everyone, welcome back to that Rugby Union show. And again, I find myself in a hotel room. It seems to be the standard these days. And not anywhere near home. I'm in Nelspruit in Bombela for a bit of a music festival, which is going to be quite interesting. But there are a lot of rugby people here, and hopefully I'll bump into Jimmy Stonehouse and some of the Pumas boys as well, who are preparing for the Currie Cup Premier Division. Be lovely to get one or two of them on the show to talk us through what it is they're expecting. I'm flying solo today. There's no Sim. He's on deadline. These journos always have excuses. And Sim has a pretty good one, and I'll mention it at the end. So we won't have the traditional Sim bin, but I might just drop what I know about what Sim is going to be writing and focusing on for the article that he's currently on deadline for. So it's just going to be myself and our guest, who I'm really looking forward to chatting to, an absolute legend. And we've been reflecting on 30 years since that 1995 Rugby World Cup final win. Last week, Kobus Visa sharing some great stories, and it was wonderful to have a little bit of insight. Now we're going to have somebody who didn't play in the north of the country, but was more centrally, coastally located at Natal back in the day. And he's still in KZN, although he is an Eastern Cape boy by heart. At least that's what I claim, because I'm from the Eastern Cape, so I like to claim him. Just don't forget, anytime you want to, just drop us a message, send your questions. Love hearing from you when you're watching live. And give us a like, a share, subscribe, share with your friends if you like these rugby conversations. Absolutely do. But the man that will be joining me tonight needs very little introduction to rugby fans, except by way of mentioning that his second name is Gregory, which I don't think a lot of people knew. Mark Andrews, absolute legend, Selborne boy, border boy, born in Elliot, I'm an Mthatha boy. And whenever people ask me who my team actually is, I always say Border Bulldogs first. They always look confused, but the Bulldogs are a thing, Mark. Firstly, what an absolute pleasure to have you join me.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I must say, it's always, when people talk about the 95 World Cup, as I said before we came on air, the scary thing is that you have to be over 35 years of age to actually remember watching it, which just shows how old we are. But yeah, fantastic to be here. I am an Eastern Cape boy, first and last, even though I've been a migrant worker in KZN for the last 28 years. But my home is East London. My home is East London. I'll be going back to live there probably next year sometime. I've had enough of Natal, KZN. And I didn't realize you were from Mthatha. I drive through there every time I go back.
Yeah, no. And we used to have to go and do our shopping in slummies because Mthatha didn't have a lot of options back in the day, when it comes to buying groceries. And it would be about a 2-hour trek, sort of past Butterworth. And back in the day, there was a border post as well. And then, go in for the day, do some shopping, and then trek all the way back in one day. So, yeah, that's, my home. And I very nearly almost had to go to Selborne College. But then my parents got moved to Pretoria, and then that changed everything for me. So I've got a very soft spot for the place. Now I've got reason to come and visit Slummies again if you're going to be there next year.
No, definitely. And I actually come from a little town called Elliot, right above Mthatha. So if you think there was no shopping in Mthatha, you don't know about Elliot. We used to have I slaughtered sheep a month. That's what we ate. Didn't go to the butcher to go and buy. We slaughtered. That's why I grew up.
Yeah, no, that's it. This is Eastern Cape vibes, and that would explain the toughness as well, and how adept you were at the game of rugby. Because we all know where the best rugby players in the country come from, and Sim would probably chime in if he were here with us, because he's a old Dalian. But we won't talk about the battles between Dale and Selborne, particularly back in the day, because that was an intense battle, wasn't it?
No, they were those games between Selborne, Dale, and Queens. The three border boys schools. We used to try and kill each other on the field, and then when you left, everybody used to say to you, when you go to varsity, the first people that you will kind of move towards are Dalians and Queenians, and you think, not a hope in hell I can hang with those guys, and that's what happens. You just have the familiarity of growing up in the Eastern Cape and having something that you can talk about. And most of my mates are Queenians, Dalians. I actually had a Queenian. There was a school with I had lunch with him. He came to Belito yesterday. So there we go.
Look at that. Look at that. I didn't think I would like the boys from Queens. And then I met Robbie Kempson, and he turned out to be a pretty decent bloke as well. So, yes, all good boys. But also, Mark, I mean, we're talking rugby, but I didn't know this, that your first sort of foray into sport and getting colors was water polo.
Yeah, Xola. So I come from a rugby family. My dad was a rugby player. My two older brothers played rugby. My cousin Keith Andrews, who played for Western Province, the Springboks, rugby players. So I didn't really have a choice. I was also a lot bigger as a youngster, so I just fitted into the mold of rugby player. But it was pretty tough in the sense of I was the youngest Andrews boy. All my brothers had played first team for Selborne. My cousin, that played provincial rugby, Craven Week. So the expectation on me was pretty huge. And then when I got to Selborne, they introduced me to a game called water polo.
Yeah.
And I thought, geez, not one Andrews has ever played water polo. Maybe it's a game I can play it can be my game. Because as rugby, it's just another Andrews guy trying to make it. But water polo, I can blaze my own trail. And I absolutely fell in love with water polo. I first played goalkeeper, ended up making the SA under 23 side, junior Springbok side, when I was 16. Played for the Border men's side when I was 15. I played 8 years Currie Cup for Border men's water polo, and it was my first love. Because rugby, I had pressure, and water polo, there was no expectation. I kept in SS schools. I kept in SS schools in water polo, and I thought I was going to Stellenbosch University on a rugby and water polo scholarship. And when I arrived there in February, and it was polo season, and I missed the rugby training session, I was called aside, and it was explained to me very clearly that I actually wasn't there on a water polo scholarship. Stellenbosch is the rugby place, and you're here for rugby. So you first go to rugby, then you can go to water polo, not the other way around. So, and then rugby became my future.
That's unbelievable. And also, I think I might mix up the years. You might have played Craven Week in 1990.
I played 88, 89, and 90. Yeah.
In 90. Yeah, so that's very strange for me, Mark, because in 1990, whilst you were playing Craven Week, my folks sent me to boarding school. And this is because of the uncertainty at the time, my dad being a soldier, moving up and down across the country. They sent me to the Berg. They sent me to the Midlands. I was in the Drakensberg. I was singing while you guys were playing rugby. And then one pre-season, I remember seeing some big burly men rock up off a bus with Ian McIntosh leading the way for a pre-season. Rob Dupree, I'm sure you were there. I'm sure Tysh was there. That was kind of the era. Jeremy Eaton, I'm just trying to remember some names now. And that was me. Switched, became a bit of a Sharks fan because I thought, look at the size of these guys. I was turned on. And Ian McIntosh was, wow, what a legend. Sad to have lost him. But the master really did a lot for Natal rugby back in the 90s, starting from around 1990.
Well, he did. And it's not just Natal rugby that he was so instrumental about. It was also SA rugby. So he was Springbok coach in 93, 94. And he brought in momentum rugby. At that stage in South Africa, we still played pretty much the kick and chase. You wanted to rather give the ball to the opponents than knock the crap out of them, try and get the ball back, play in their half kind of stuff. Where Mac came along, and I think it was the Rod McQueen that he went to spend some time with in Australia. And he said, guys, rugby is changing. We've got to keep the ball in hand. We've got to be clever when we kick, but we've got to hold the ball. And when we hold the ball, we can't hold it and throw it backwards. We've got to hold it and go forward. And we've got to get across the gain line. And Mac brought out that 15-on-7 principle in rugby, where you want to have 15 guys with and behind the ball playing against 7 defenders. You always want to get past their forwards. And it's like 15 players against 7 backs. And Mac brought in that momentum rugby. That when Kitch Christie came, the coach after Mac in 95, I can remember him saying, guys, I'm not changing anything. We just need to get smarter about how we play. And Kitch was a student of the game as well. And he just worked out the very much like Rassie, what favors the way we play. And if you think back to 95, Joel and Juba just kicked the ball dead the whole time because Kitch had worked out that test matches are lost mostly by penalties. And if you play in the opponent's half the whole time, they get a penalty, they can't hurt you on the scoreboard. Mm-hmm. So, but it was Mac who had a big role to play in South African rugby, from changing our culture from just kick and chase to actually carry the ball, get across the game line, work the phases, manipulate defenses. And he was a phenomenal. He was an amazing man as a rugby man and an amazing guy to play under as a coach.
Yeah, no, he was phenomenal, and I like that you talk about how Kitch built on what he really started talking and going on about, because even Nick Mallett still sort of referred back quite often to Ian McIntosh and his influence. And I remember Mallett saying, we have to score 4 tries every match. We have to score 4 tries every match if you want to win. And the first person I think I heard saying that was probably Mac himself, unless I'm confusing things and getting old and grey and hiding my no hair under a cap.
No, so I mean, I actually can't thank Mac enough. I mean, I was a 21-year-old, came to Natal University. Well, actually, it wasn't Natal University. I was on a holiday, and a long story, but I ended up playing for Natal in the 20. I've been playing in France before that. Left Stellenbosch University, played in France for 9 months, broke my leg, came back, did my rehab. Then I was waiting to go back to UCT. I didn't like Stellenbosch that much for a whole host of reasons, and and Mac had seen me play at the Craven Week was in Durban in 1990, and Mac was sitting watching the games. And when I arrived, I then ended up through default playing for Natal in the 20 side for the last 2 games of the season. And Mac came to me and said to me, "Listen, Master, what are you doing next year?" I said, "Well, I'm going back to UCT or to the Cape." And he said, "Don't be a prick." He said, "You think the Western Province, if you know Mac, that's what he called it."
Sounds like Mac.
Exactly. And he said to me, "Do you think the Western Province coach knows who you are?" He says, "He's got no clue who you are. I know who you are. And in fact, you'll be part of my training squad next year if you stay. So if you are smart, you'll stay in Natal." And that's what happened. I ended up quickly signing up to Maritzburg University, went back to varsity, and Mac was true to his word. February, I got a phone call. My name was in the Mercury as the training squad with all the guys I'd watched as legends when I was a latte. And the rest is history. He backed me and I became a Springbok. My first year as 21 playing for the Sharks, I made the Springboks as well under him.
That's unbelievable. And also, I think Bear's saying, especially for any younger viewers who might not have watched a whole lot of Mark Andrews, you were not a stereotypical lock. I mean, last week we had Kobus on. That was a stereotypical Springbok South African. That's what they all looked like, and you didn't fit that mold.
No, and you're 100% right. And the person I have to thank, there are actually 2 people. One is Ian Jones, the all-black lock at that time. Ian Jones weighed 108 kgs. I think when he had his boots on, he was 108. Boots off about 105, 106. And then John Eales from Australia. So John Eales, right, I think, weighed 113, 14. He wasn't a beast of a man. He was quite tall. I think he was about 2 meters 4. He was a tall guy, but he wasn't built like Kobus or Drickus Hutting or, and Ian Mack, when I first got selected for the Springboks in the tour in 93 to Argentina, they chose me as a flank. So I was 2 meters, weighed 114 kgs, and I was told I was too small to be a lock. So Mac took me along, and I played flank. So my first game I ever played for the Springboks, not in a test match, I played with Ruben Kruger in the flank. So I played, I think, 7 flank, and Ruben played 6 flank. And then after that, I think they realized that, hold on, I'm a better lock than I am loose forward, until Kitch came along and stuffed up that theory in 95.
Because that's not where you ended up. You ended up at the back of the scrum playing at number 8. But there's something there, because, I mean, even Ali van den Berg, by the time he came through at the Sharks, beanpole, skinny guy, but so athletic, hell of a quick for a lock. And I think that was when I first realized that, okay, well, locks don't have to look like a Drickus. They don't have to look like a Kobus. They can offer different things. And it helped, in my mind, pass the 2 different roles as well. Do you think your athleticism was a big help for you as well? Because, we don't tend to think of old school South African locks as being athletic, as being quick, as being slick, when it comes to the hands. But that was, Mark Andrews through and through.
But you have to remember something else, though, also. In 1993 or 1992, 93, when you're in the line out, you weren't allowed to be lifted. So you had to actually jump for the ball. Yeah. So you had to be fairly athletic. And what happened was they always chose big, bulking locks who couldn't really jump. So when I came along and I could jump and I was fairly athletic, that's where I stood out initially, because I didn't stand out in carrying the ball and running over 5 people like most of the traditional locks did. They were big human beings. I was more athletic and I could jump for the ball. My kickoffs, I could move around. I could play. I had the pace and the mobility of a loose forward, and that's what Mac liked. Mac said, by playing you, I get an extra loose forward. And I want to carry the ball, so I need players who can move and get to the ball. And, so I was very chuffed that Mac came along. Keith Christie, funny enough, Keith Christie still liked the big locks. He still liked Hannes Strydom, Kobus, Drickershatin. He liked the big kind of strong, forceful lock who was like the bruiser on the side. I didn't fit that role. I had to eventually kind of become a little bit more abrasive in the way I played. But I think that's more just my personality than it is. I enjoyed the physical side of the game and that contact part of it. Sometimes.
Yeah, you definitely did. But let's talk about Kitch, because I think most South African rugby fans, and maybe even yourself, were surprised at your selection for that 95 World Cup at 8th man, because I hadn't seen you operate at 8. Yes, on the side of the scrum, obviously at lock. Were you surprised that that became your position in the most crucial of competitions?
Colin, to say surprise is an understatement. You must remember, I played in 94. I played the tour in New Zealand, played 3 test matches against the All Blacks. End of the year, we played England, Ireland, Wales, I think Scotland. So I played against all some of the top locks in the world. And in that generation, there were some of the best locks in the world. You had Ian Jones and Robin Brooke. You had John Eales. You had Martin Johnson, Olivier Roumain, the French. You had some really world-class locks. And I played against them, and I knew I could actually compete here. So 95 came along, and I was like, okay, now I'm going to make my mark, excuse the pun, as a lock and take on the best in the world. And then we got to the semi-final, where I was about to play against Roumain, and Kish breaks the news to me that I'm going to be playing 8th man and not lock, which was, and to be honest, the last time I played 8th man was under 13 or 14 at Selborne. So it's a very different game playing a primary school 8th man and then going to go play in the biggest game in the world at that stage, the semi-final of the World Cup, playing out of position. So, it wasn't, I've got to be honest, I didn't enjoy the last 2 weeks of that World Cup. It was 2 of the most stressful weeks I've had in my life, because if I'd been playing lock, I knew I could have competed against Roumain. I knew I could compete against the All Black locks. But playing 8th man, but now I still had to jump in the lineouts against them, but the kind of role that I had to play was a little bit different. I was now more in a defensive. In those days, the 8th man didn't have to bind to the back of the scrum on defense. I could move 5 meters away. So now, when you play lock, you got your head down, you're not thinking about what happens back there. Now you're standing there and you've got to watch the 8th man pick and go. You've got to watch the fly from the center of the short ball. You have to watch Intermac coming back on a dummy scissors reverse pass. So, like, you stand there thinking, "Geez, I've got to cover everybody here," and you haven't done it before. So for me, I knew I could get exposed. If you look at the final, I mean, we had the reunion last week in Joburg. I've never watched the World Cup final. Never watched it. I'm too scared. I'm too scared the result changes. I'm too terrified. So we were sitting in the function. They started playing the game again. I eventually managed to excuse myself from my table and slide out the side. But in the first scrum, I got exposed on the blind side. And I can still remember vividly kind of coming across, and I hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, they got around me on the outside, and they managed to get 40, 50. And I was like, geez, this is just the start of the game. I got 80 more minutes of this of being exposed on a dry field. And luckily, my teammates were that good that they managed to hide my weaknesses on the day. Very chuffed for this.
Yeah, and that was at the Highveld, on the Highveld as well. It was a dry day. It was a pretty chilly day. If I remember the afternoon, we were running around going crazy. as opposed to the week before in the semi-final in Durban in the driving rain. I mean, that match was obviously delayed by I don't know how many hours. I don't know what Louis Lake did. I don't really want to know, but the match went on, and you guys somehow managed to pull through. But there would have been very different conditions in terms of just the space afforded to the French to run at you.
Correct. And that's one of the reasons why Kitch said he was going to play me there, because the French had 4 line-out jumpers. We had myself, Kobus on the front ball, and Kobus and I were both 2 locks at that stage. So I was having to jump at 4, and Kitch said, if we don't get our line-outs, we're not going to be able to play in this game. We've got to tighten the game up. There's going to be a lot of kicking out because the ball's wet. We have to be able to have another option in the line-outs. So, and also because it's going to be so wet. For me, it was fantastic because I knew I wasn't going to get exposed on pace on the outside in the running game. So it worked against the French. I think I messed up 3 or 4 of their lineouts. We won lineouts. It worked. The plan wasn't for me to play 8th man in the final on the dry, half-out conditions against the All Black side, who at that stage were the best attacking rugby side in the world.
Yeah, no, they really were, and it was not necessarily even the biggest names at the in the day, because I think everyone always just thinks of John Olomu and his impact on that World Cup. But you know, there were a lot of other guys who were able. You mentioned the Brooks, both of them unbelievable players. Graham Bishop was just doing absolutely wild things behind the scrum.
Yeah, Josh Cromfeld, who was basically
Josh Cromfeld.
So,
yes.
So Cromfeld just ran lines behind Loma. Loma would take 5 people to stop him, pop the ball to Cromfeld to go and score. I mean, that they had a really competent side.
Yeah, and then obviously Mehrtens was just slotting them away as well at 10. It was really good to see him at the reunion.
It was very good to see him. And he's a funny bugger. He's like, I mean, as he said, he hated me with a passion when we were playing. And I hated him. I just wanted to catch, as a tight forward, to catch those pretty bastards on the outside is great fun, because they're not the toughest guys around. I'll Henry Honeyball stuffed up that theory when he came along as a fly-off. He was tougher than most of the tight forwards. But it was very interesting listening to Zinza and Brooke and them talking about what that World Cup was like for them in '95. When they believed that they were going to win as much as we believed we were going to win. And when Mehrtens tells the stories, and he's a hell of a funny guy. If you ever get an opportunity to interview him, you've got it, because he had us laugh. He had us laughing. I mean, he was saying that he's still waiting for his medal from South African government for what he did for South Africa in '95, because he missed 4 drop kicks. He says, everybody remembers Joel's drop kick. He said, but bugger that, he missed 4. He did more for South African nation building than Joel ever did. He had a point.
Thanks, Mert. We appreciate you, and you're always allowed to come and visit as well. But what a phenomenal bloke, and everybody loved to hate him, but that's only as a result of how good they were.
But he was,
but that '95 World Cup was also just. I can't imagine the level of pressure, because yes, always going to be spotlight on the Springboks ever since '92, coming back from isolation. Yes, obviously everybody wanted to see the Boks do well, but the spotlight shone particularly brightly on the Springboks in '95. And you know, Madiba being in and around the team and talking and supporting and dropping in at camp, you know, unannounced as well. Were you guys prepared for that? I mean, or was it all just a shock how big the moment was?
No, we actually trained in the Silvermine Army base in Cape Town, and we had, I don't know if people know, but because there was a threat of incidents happening in the '95 World Cup, there was still a lot of volatility politically in South Africa, and we actually had 3 or 4 security guards with us. Every team did. But we had 2 guys with us in the team bus all the time. They had Springbok tracksuits, they had Springbok kit bag, but we had boots and training gear in our kit bag. They had machine guns and pistols in their kit bag. So that came along. I mean, there still must be a lot of signatures of kids asking for autographs when you got off the bus, and they had to sign like they were players. And obviously, the kids didn't know who all the players were exactly. But when you arrived at the Silvermine Air Force Base, I never forget, we arrived that day, and there was a fire engine parked outside the change room. I was like, a fire engine. And then on the roof, there were snipers sitting on the roof. And then there were guys walking with guard dogs. And I thought, Jesus, these guys are taking our protection pretty seriously. It's really impressive. But little did we know that, but they said to us before training to bring a tracksuit. We normally used to shower back at the hotel. So we showered there. We got told to stay. We were going to have a function after the training session, which was pretty strange, especially before the opening game against Australia. I think it was a Tuesday training session. And then we went inside, shower, change, and we got told to stay in the hall. And next thing we heard a helicopter. And we were like, a helicopter? Because this must be some important Lani coming to see us. And then we were told to line up from the door. From the door, and me being the lighty in the side, I was with the physio and the baggage master and all the rest of the guys at the end. And the door opened, and in walked Mornay and Francois with Nelson Mandela. Remember, like, it was like, jeez, like, he's come to see us. Like, isn't like we've been trundled off to go and visit him. And he walked down that line and he shook everybody's hand. He got to me. I spoke closer to him. I told him I was from Elliot in the Eastern Cape. He told me we must come braai some gusha, some meat, nyama. We must. And I kind of joked. And then he turned around and he shook the rest of the guys' hands. And I'll never forget this. And as he got to the last person, Mornay du Plessis, our manager, turned to him and said, Mr. Mandela, would you like to have some tea or coffee? And the hotel had set up a table in the corner of the hall of coffee, biscuits, snacks and that. And he said, I haven't finished greeting everybody. I remember thinking, there's no one else to greet.
Who else? Yeah.
And he turned around and he walked to the corner at the back of the hall. And there were two ladies, I think a colored lady and an African lady, holding their brooms. And they'd obviously picked up something was going on and kind of heard something. And they'd snuck back into the hall after they'd swept it and cleaned it. And they were standing, obviously, to come and see who was coming. And Nelson Mandela turned around and he walked to the back of the hall and he walked to them both and to the Afrikaans lady, spoke Afrikaans. Of course, the lady asked her where she was from, the Transkei. And then he thanked them both for looking after the Amaboka Boka.
Wow.
And I remember thinking to myself, wow, what world leader has time for the small people? There was no cameras. There was no cameraman. There were no TV crews. It was just us. So he wasn't doing this to kind of show what a great human he was. That was who he was. And then we all followed him like the Pied Piper when he got to the table. And he did the exact same thing. Before he took a coffee, before he did anything, he looked at the ladies and he asked them, he spoke Afrikaans and he spoke Xhosa and he said, where are you from? Spoke to them, asked them a bit, and then he said, thank you so much for what you're doing for our my little daughter's going to grandpa across the road. And he said,
lovely.
And he said, thank you so much for what you're doing for the Amaboka Boka. And it had a huge impression on me, and it has to this day. He was just an incredible man.
Yeah, no, I've got goosebumps just listening to that story, like unbelievable. And also, I think just winning over so many doubters, because especially like I keep saying about the youngsters who might be watching this, I don't think they understand just how deep the divisions were in South Africa in the 90s. The level of violence in the lead up to the 95 World Cup and the state of emergency almost being declared again. It was absolute stuff. But his impact was evident, and the impact of the Springboks and just how big the moment was for me. Yes, there was anticipation, and I knew it was coming. And we were talking about the World Cup, and my father, being a typical Xhosa boy from the Transkei, and politicized at a young age, was a bit of an All Blacks fan, along with his brothers, and that World Cup changed things.
You can't blame him. You can't blame him.
Yeah, I didn't know no better at the time. And I was like, oh, go Boks, and he didn't understand. And, and the impact of that was so huge. But back to 95, back to that opening match, and it was Cape Town, Australia, reigning world champions, Michael Liner. You speak about John Eales, I think at the time. Campo, at the time, John Eales was still called God, wasn't he? I mean...
No, he was called Nobody.
No, nobody. Thank you.
Because nobody's perfect.
Because nobody's perfect, and he was. Jeepers, he could jaw. But you guys came out, and obviously everyone remembers Peter Hendrick's try. But there was a match as well that happened. Did it change your minds? Did it all of a sudden start to think like, oh, hang on a minute, reigning world champions, we've just beaten them in Cape Town. Yes, it wasn't easy, and we tend to remember it back as, it was an easy win. It wasn't an easy win at all. But in terms of the belief that it fostered for that team, what did it mean for you guys?
Well, it gave us belief that we could actually go the whole way and win. You're playing against the reigning world champions. You come into the game with huge names. I think, and I stand to be corrected, but I think there were 4 players in that Australian side who had more caps than the whole of the Springbok side. So they had a vast amount of experience. I mean, I think I was playing my 8th or 9th test match in the opening game against Australia, and I was one of the senior guys on the side as far as caps went. So, I mean, we were all novices, really. I mean, as far as test rugby went, we weren't experienced. And we knew, though, that if we won that game, our kids used to sort of say there's a green and gold route to the final. The gold route is if you beat Australia, and the green route is you have to go on the road, and it's going to be a lot harder. But he said we have to beat Australia. And I think our whole focus, I think we were probably as focused for the game against Australia as we were in the final, because that ultimately was a mini final for us. We had to win that game to be able to make. And again, I still don't quite understand it. I don't know how kids thought playing against France in the semi-final was the easier route against England. No. But again, I mean, if you look at what the All Blacks did to England, they clearly didn't have a very hard game with Loma running over Cat about 5 times. So, yeah, but that opening game was the big one for us. It was pretty much our final until we played the real final.
Well, and then I think there was an oddity with the World Cup, because there's almost... There are matches that we always talk about. We talk about Australia, obviously. We talk about the Battle of Erasmus against Canada. We talk about that semi-final. We talk about Samoa as well. I think that was the big match for Chester. But there was also another game that seemingly was lost in between, and that was against Romania, also at Newlands. Did you play against Romania?
No, I didn't.
Because it was 5 days later.
Well, you're right. I completely forgot that we played against Romania. I was trying to think at the reunion. I was thinking, I mean, besides for the starting guys who played the main games, I was like feeling sorry for the rest of the guys who only played one game against Canada, and that was a game that was basically a boxing match. But I forget that they played against Romania.
Yeah, there was a game again.
I never played against Romania. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And it was actually quite close. It was 21-8. I remember Gavin Johnson having to do a little bit of saving. And how's this? Adrian Richter scored 2 tries to basically win the game. But almost everybody I speak to has forgotten that we played against Romania in the 95 World Cup. And I understand why. But I just find that an absolute oddity. And how good Romania was at the time, because rugby, in the Eastern Bloc back then was a military game, and they took it very seriously. And those are hellishly hard men. And it's good to see a team like Georgia now almost rediscovering their strength, because these teams were incredibly strong back in the day.
I can actually remember, and I'm almost embarrassed to admit that I forgot we played against them. But I can remember now the press conference, not the press conference, the cocktail function after the game with their players. And if I remember correctly, their captain was saying that they had lost a third of their team in war. Yeah. I can't actually remember who they were playing against, but a third of their players who would have been selected for the World Cup had actually died in a war a couple of years before. So, and they were tough guys. They were really tough guys.
Yeah, no, they were incredibly tough guys. And then you guys had to endure the Battle of Erasmus. It's legendary now.
No, it was the same, like what we call the dirt tracker side.
It was the Dirties who played that game.
Yeah. With a couple of our starting players, because I think we only had 28 guys. That's when James Dalton and the Henrys got the red cards, and their tournament ended, sadly.
Yeah, and there was a lot of worry after that about how it was going to impact the team. And obviously, Bullet couldn't play further in the tournament. And I mean, he was a world-class hooker at the time. Were you guys worried, or did you feel like you had contingency going towards the Samoa and the knockouts?
So, Xola, thinking back, and again, I don't dwell too much. It's 30 years ago, so it's quite hard to remember, to be honest. But I do remember us feeling like that we had been victimized, that the rugby world didn't want the Boks to win. We just come out of isolation. Like, how dare they win the World Cup the first time they're playing it at home? That's not right. They need to fight a couple of World Cups before they have the right to play in the final. So I just felt like we were being picked on. I know that when we played in New Zealand, every single ref, I know we always joke, but in one of the opening games, midweek games in New Zealand, the guys used to joke that the ball got knocked on, and we went down a scrum. I think Val Bartman was the captain of the side, and he said to the ref, he said, whose ball is it? And the referee said, it's our ball. I mean, it's their ball. So they were so biased. I mean, they just didn't want us to do well. And we got so used to that when we went to Europe at the end of the year, 94. We had the same thing. It felt like every call went against us. Every referee, every linesman, everything just went against us. So in the 95, when that happened, like, James didn't punch anybody. James, for once, actually didn't. I don't recall him punching anybody. He just ran in, and he got a red card. And got suspended, which was ridiculous. But again, we felt like they were having a go at us. And if anything, it made us tighter. It made us go, we'll stuff them. We'll show them. We'll show them.
Yeah, no, I mean, and then you scored 40-odd points against Western Samoa back in the time. And I can't remember. I can't remember who said, imagine they played all of Samoa. But you didn't need to, because Chester was an absolute chief on that day as well, just raking in the tries. And I think you got a rhythm, perhaps, that we had been yearning for, not just a struggle and a fight and a battle, but to really blow somebody off the park. And you guys did that day.
No, he was amazing. I remember the game. That's the game where Juba broke his hand. I broke my rib. I actually had a mate last week phone me, laughing. I said, what are you laughing at? Why are you phoning me laughing? He said, I'm sitting here watching the game against Samoa, where their hooker, I don't know who he was, but he cleaned me out on our try line. I was trying to slow the ball down. He got about a 40-meter head start, and he launched himself at me, and he broke my rib on my left-hand side. But if you look at the game, I go flying, land on the side, but I got winded, and at the same time, I cracked my rib. So I couldn't breathe. And I was like rolling around, writhing, like I was dying on the side. He said to me, geez, I forgot you were so soft. You were lying there like a stuck pig. You bastard. So, but anyway, I can remember that game for that. I scored a try.
But you scored a try. You scored a try. Was it after the incident?
That was after. Then I went off. I don't think I finished the rest of the game. I was into. But luckily in those days they could inject you. So when it came to the semi-final and final, I played with a large dose of local anesthetic, which helps immensely.
Nah, man. And then we spoke about the semi-final, but that Samoa game for me was so special, just in terms of getting some enjoyment in. And it's something that I almost craved because the Kiwis were getting big scores. They demolished England, for instance. And that game for me, I think, just one, Chester doing Chester things. And in terms of the context of the team and South Africa and transformation and all of this stuff was just absolutely stupendous. Amazing. It was amazing.
It was a fairy tale. It honestly was a fairy tale.
Yeah. And we talked about the semi-final and then the final. I would imagine, and you talk about that it was 30 years ago, I would imagine that most of that match is actually a blur.
All those games are a blur. Especially, again, if I think back to my career, and remember that World Cup was so big in all of our lives at that stage. It was huge. We all were inexperienced. Every minute when you're playing in front of a home crowd and there's so much pressure, it feels like you run on and you got to run off for half time, or those days you stayed in the field and then you play and then the game's over. Towards the end of my career, I could actually enjoy a game because I could see what is going on. And that's what experience gives you, the ability for the game to slow down and actually see what's going on and enjoy it. I remember playing in the Currie Cup final in 95, I think 95 and 96. And I remember, I think 96 we played against Transvaal at Ellis Park. And I can remember the game almost in slow motion. Because from playing that 95 World Cup at such a high intensity that I'd got that experience behind me. And all of a sudden I was able to see games happening in front of me and not feel like it was a frantic dash around the field. And that's exactly, and you're right, Xola, you're right. 95, I remember certain incidences of every single game I played in 95, but I can't actually remember the games at all, to be honest, as an entity.
Yeah. Yeah, I just looked now. Yeah, 95 was Western Province. But it was at Kings Park.
Kings Park.
And in fact, and 95 was pretty much the start of what I think was the greatest period of Currie Cup rugby in Sharks or Natal history, because 96 you guys went on to beat the Lions. 97, I think you might not have been there, but so competitive just as a team, playing the Ian McIntosh style sort of rugby. It was, what a glorious time, and then creating these cult heroes, and Cabos van der Westhuizen with his long hair, just slaying the time.
He actually scored. I think in 96 he broke the Currie Cup record for the most tries scored in a season. Again, Mac used to say that if we go 5 phases and get the ball out with momentum, our wings will score. James Small was a great player. Cabos was just quick. I think he didn't like being hurt, so that's the reason why he scored so many tries. He just managed to evade all the tackles.
But he was great, and I bumped into him a couple of years ago, obviously after he'd made his move to Mauritius, and still the same old Cabos, and I couldn't think of a better place for the man to end up as well. It just all makes sense. It all ties in for me. Mark, we've been speaking so long. I was going to ask you big questions about the Springboks in Italy, and we're running out of time. So I'm going to ask Paul, the long-suffering Welshman in the background, to just put up that Springbok squad, because this is a massive 30-year jump ahead to Rassie Erasmus's era. He's selected a team to take on Italy at Loftus. And sure, I can't help think, but the future looks bright. And I say this when so many of these guys are actually in their 30s or bordering on 30. And I love to see that. I mean, just going through the list, Malcolm Marx, Wilco Low, Eben, Lurt, Vincent Tshituka is getting a first run out at, I think, 27 at the moment. Henry Pollard is over 30. Damian Deland, Jesse Creel, Cheslin Colby, these guys are in their 30s. We don't see this happen in modern day rugby, but what an experienced team. And I love that Rassie is saying, okay, cool, if your body can hold up, we're going to play.
Well, I think, I hadn't seen that side, but it's an amazing side. And again, you look at the experience in that side. My only concern going forward, it's actually not a concern, I'd speak rubbish. What Rassie, by using, I think, 54 players last year, he brought in the youngsters, but he kept the experienced players, and he played them together. And I think it's coming through in our rugby. So it's going to be a hard decision what guys to not take to the next World Cup. And I think maybe now, but again, you can't only look forward to the next World Cup. You've got to look forward to every single test match. And to play with an experienced player, I never had that privilege. I mean, as I was a 22-year-old playing test match rugby, 21, and the guys who were playing with me had 4 test matches. So, I was almost learning as much as they were learning. But when I know towards the end of my career, when I played with youngsters, I could see the game happening. I knew what was going on. They will start out charging on the field. And what Rassie's doing is he understands the value of experience. And I know, I'm incredibly impressed with the way Rassie has managed his players and the way he's managed his squad. And I think he has a clear idea of what he wants to achieve towards the next World Cup. But at the same time, he knows that he has to take care of his senior players, give them a dignified exit, unlike in our day when I was 29 and told that I had nothing left to give South African rugby, and I was basically had to go and plough my trade overseas. Where what South African rugby, or Rassie especially, is doing is unbelievable. I think it's fantastic. But he's taking that experience and he's bringing young guys through, and they are learning from the experienced guys. And it's going to be just this pipeline of talent coupled with experience that's going to go to the next World Cup if Rassie gets it right. I mean, our rugby future in this country looks absolutely magnificent.
So you were 29. Was that the last time you played for the Boks? That's unbelievably young.
Yeah, I was 29. But I started when I was 21. So when I was 25, I lost all my hair. People thought I was 30 already. I'd played every single game. And you must remember, Yeah, myself. Exactly. But you must also remember, in those days, there were no subs. So my first 40-something test matches, I played 80 minutes of every single game. So people saw you the whole time on the field. So, I mean, I still, I mean, again, getting bored and so young and playing so much rugby on TV in front of people, it felt like I'd been there forever. I mean, I remember journalists, when they found out I was 27 years old, like, geez, I thought you should be retiring by now, because I'd been around for so long. But again, I mean, it is a regret of mine that at 29, I would have loved to have played the Bucky's Butter. I would have absolutely. I played one game, the junior box, the SA side with Bucky's, and I really would have loved to have mentored Bucky's and played with Bucky's. I played games with Victor, but I would have loved to have played with Bucky's. I never got that opportunity. I never got that opportunity to share my experience with him. I mean, he didn't need it at the end. He was an incredible, one of the best locks we ever had. But I still think I could have added some value to his game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, geez, don't you undersell yourself, Mark? I mean, I think by the time you finished off, 12 test tries, which for a lock was ridiculous as well.
I think it's still the world record for tier 1 test lock. I think guys in the tier 1 test, I think someone said to me, there's in the tier 2 or tier 3, there's some lock who scored 38 tries in test, but I think that's for Azerbaijan and some other country. That doesn't really matter. But I don't know. But that's something
unbelievable. And your last test match was at the Subi Oval in Perth, which was the first time I went to
my last test match was England.
Was it England?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And we lost, and I never got opportunity to end on a high. That's such a sport.
Well, you've won. You've not ended yet, and I think the highs are still coming because you're the father of a 3-year-old, which is going to keep you young. Look, I'm the father of 2 girls, and it's the most special thing. Is this what occupies your time now?
Yeah, well, I've got a son who's 23 in Australia, another son who's 21 in Australia. My older daughter's in matric this year, and then I've got a little 3-year-old. So. Yeah, I'm not quite up to Elon Musk level of having 18 children, but I think I'll stop. I don't have his bank balance. I'll stop at 4. But
man has a
exactly. I mean, I've been very blessed to have a child so late in my life again. When you have that, talking about experience, when you're a young father and you're young, you actually shouldn't be allowed to have children, because what the hell do you know when you're in your 20s having a child? You shouldn't be allowed to have a child. But in my late 40s, it's been magnificent. I've absolutely loved it. And what have you been up to?
Yeah, and what have you been up to? Otherwise, I always am interested.
Yeah, so I founded a sports company 15 or longer than that now. Supplying mass smart game macro and builders, but out of that because of some dishonesty in partners. That's another story. But I did a 2-year restraint to trade, and then I, through a friend who was in the corporate world, I got into the renewable business, and I've absolutely loved it. So I structure deals. I represent a fund, one of the biggest players in the country in renewables. They're busy building a 55 billion rand solar farm in Dar to wheel power. So they're big players. I work for myself, and I structure deals for them, managing expectations between large power consumers and the fund, because sometimes they don't talk the same language. And that's what I do. And wherever my laptop, my cell phone is, that's where I work from. My family is the most important thing to me in my life now. So I think I've taken me a long time to get my work-life balance, but I'm getting there, and I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, and I love asking that question because I know that at some stage there'll be some rugby player, maybe current, maybe young, who's thinking about the rugby, but there's so much more. And I find it fascinating to know what it is guys got up to, because it's never anything you would have thought of as an 18-year-old, as a 20-year-old. I mean, I'm hopefully going to talk to Taish as well, who's doing some construction somewhere in the continent or whatever it is. And I'm so interested in what comes after, because it's almost like, yes, we've single-minded, we focus on the rugby, but it's so important to plan for the future.
Well, it is, but it's a hell of a hard thing, because the number of players who go through incredible depressions after their careers is astounding. And most players see it as a weakness, so they don't stand up and go, hey, I'm battling. Because if you tie your value to the game you play, and you're a rugby player, and every weekend you go out and people are talking to you and photographs and autographs, and people tie their values to the sport they're playing. So whether it's basketball, NFL, soccer, rugby, whatever it is, and then you stop playing that sport, do you still have a value? And I think a lot of players kind of battle to find who they are, because their personality and who they are is so tied up in the sport they play, that when they end that sport, it feels like their lives have come to an end. And most players, to be successful, you got to be incredibly focused. You got to be selfish to be a professional sportsman, because you got to worry about when you sleep, what you eat, when you eat. You have to become selfish. And all of a sudden, you stop playing, and you've got all these tendencies that made you an incredible athlete, but they don't necessarily fit into the working world. They don't fit into families, because you can't be selfish. So it's scary, but for me, I love weekends. I look forward to weekends, because I can spend quality time with my kids.
And you didn't have weekends for the longest time.
No, I didn't have weekends. I mean, we work 7 days a week, because on Sundays you're having your flush out session, your medical checkups, you play on the Saturday. You're so bloody sore on a Sunday you can hardly move anyway, and it's 7 days a week. So what I've absolutely loved is having weekends. I love it. I mean, there's life away from sport, but I don't think there's enough in place to help players. Luckily, the players now, the top players, earn enough money that they aren't desperate to try and find income, because that's terrible. If you're trying to find an income, if you ever made money in your life, or you just mentioned it you got a house and you pay for bond and your career comes to an end, then what do? You're not going to be earning the money you're earning. So it's hard for players, but the top players earn enough money that they can take 2-3 years to find out what they want to do, and they should have the reserves to get them through that time until they kind of find an opportunity. But it is tough for the players who don't earn the big money. It's a scary profession. It really is.
Yeah, very much. These are the questions I love asking, because I find that these are the conversations that we have in pockets. And I remember when I was still doing the TV, the Super Sport thing, and, a former rugby player who shall remain unnamed, but he's found his way and is doing incredibly well as a professional in his industry. Got invited by Super Sport, come and join us at Loftus. We're going to do a test match and you'll be on the field, talking to Xola and the guys. And I get a call, was as I'm parking at Affy's, because we use their parking lot, and here's this bloke absolutely lost. He's been to Loftus countless times. He's played hundreds of matches, but he's never driven himself from the airport to Pretoria. He got so lost, and he was in the south of Joburg trying to navigate his way, because you don't have time to think about these things as a rugby player. And these are the little lessons that I love imparting on, hopefully, some youngster who's thinking about a future in the game. It's not just about the game, it's about more than that, and also beyond.
Absolutely. It is, as I say, there is a life after rugby. But you have to also understand, I mean, to be a professional rugby player is a very hard career, because it's a career that has a lifespan, a very limited lifespan. And when that lifespan ends, your mates from varsity are now well entrenched in their careers, whether they're doctors, accountants, lawyers, businessmen, construction, plumbers, whatever. They're entrenched in their careers 10 years down the line. You now end your one career, and now you've got to start another career. And most times you have no clue what that career is going to be. And you've got to bumble around a bit and try and find what you want to do, and hopefully not lose a lot of your money along the way. It's okay to go and work for someone when you retire. You don't have to be the main oak. No one expects you to walk in and be the boss of a new company the day you retire from rugby. If anything, I'd advise every player, go and work for someone. Go and work for someone you admire and learn.
Yeah. I could work for you, Mark Andrews. You're an absolute legend. I'm gonna call it there. Enkosi man, Mark. Enkosi kakhulu. Masithemba sizodibana eMonti kulo nyaka ozayo, because you're going home, and I'm hoping to come home too.
Xola, if you come to East London, you got my number, give me a call. It'd be lovely to have a beer and to, as the Eastern Cape guys say, to tan a chop. Or
The Tanner
to
chop,
braai
all
chop, the
five.
tan a chop. I look forward to it.
You're a legend. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Ciao. Right. Well, we're going to call it. I kept Mark on for longer than I thought I would, but what a chat, what a gent. And, hopefully we'll get a chance to catch up again. But it's been absolutely wonderful having these two back-to-back sort of memories of the 1995 Rugby World Cup. Quibus was also very generous with his time and sharing his point of view, and great to have Mark on. I just say that I might mention before I go out to what it is that's going to be focusing on. So look out for him online. And I know that top of mind, and like I said, we don't have a sim this time round, for him was a closer look at the Springbok number 8. And that's because there have been a couple of injuries. We spoke about Cameron Hanekom earlier on, I think a couple of episodes back. He's injured. Troki Juanro Augustus is injured, and he was looking like the man to come in and fill in the number 8 jersey. So since I suppose Jasper Wiese is kind of the incumbent at the moment, but in terms of depth, who are the number 8s? And maybe you could add that to the comments below, who your go-to number 8s, if you are Rassie, would be for this international season. Well, that's it, folks. Good luck to the Springboks who take on Italy this weekend, if you're watching, in July of 2025. It's a big year and a big attritional year as well when it comes to Rassie planning for the future. And Mark mentioned it as well. We don't know who's going to be at the 2027 Rugby World Cup. And I think that these matches, particularly the 2 against Italy, the 1 against Georgia, before the Rugby Championship, are probably set up in terms of selection to allow Rassie to make those long-term decisions. Always a pleasure chatting to you, and catch you again same time next week. Cheers.